The great hall of the Council of Voices stretched out like an endless cavern carved from living crystal. Light from a dozen alien suns filtered through the translucent walls, casting strange shadows across the assembled representatives of 200 spacefaring civilizations. This was the heart of the Galactic Concord, the place where the fate of entire species was decided with a single vote. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood alone at the speaker's platform, a small human figure surrounded by giants. To his left, the Vethkai delegation towered over him, their insectoid bodies clicking and shifting with barely concealed impatience. To his right, the pale-skinned Morvani watched him with cold, calculating eyes. Behind him, rows upon rows of alien faces stared down from their elevated seats, most of them wearing expressions of boredom or contempt. Daniel had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 11 years. He knew how the game was played. He knew that humanity occupied the lowest rung of the galactic ladder, barely tolerated and never respected. But he also knew that patience and diplomacy were the only tools his people had. Or so everyone believed. He cleared his throat and activated the translation matrix embedded in his collar. His words would reach every ear in the chamber, transformed into whatever language each species understood. Honored representatives of the Concord, he began, keeping his voice steady and respectful. I come before you today with a modest request on behalf of Earth and her colonies. As you know, humanity has been a faithful member of this alliance for 37 years. We have honored every treaty. We have followed every regulation. We have shared our scientific discoveries openly and freely. A clicking sound interrupted him. Counselor Zyrith, the senior Vethkai representative, was making the noise that served as laughter among his kind. Daniel paused, but the clicking did not stop. It grew louder, and soon other Vethkai joined in. Forgive me, Cyrus said, his mandibles spreading in what might have been a smile. Please continue, human. Tell us more about your contributions to the Concord. Daniel swallowed his pride and pressed on. Earth requests access to mining rights in the Outer Veil region. Specifically, we seek permission to harvest resources from 7 uninhabited moons in the Drevis system. These moons are rich in titanium and helium-3, materials essential for our continued development. No other species has claimed these bodies. We ask only for the chance to use what no one else wants. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the Morvani delegate, a female named High Speaker Veleth, rose from her seat. Her pale features twisted into an expression of theatrical disbelief. The humans want more, she announced, her voice dripping with mockery. These soft-skinned primates who cannot even achieve faster than light, travel without engines we gifted to them, now dare to ask for mining rights. Laughter erupted across the chamber. Not the polite, restrained kind, but the cruel and open kind that was meant to wound. Daniel stood perfectly still, his face betraying nothing. But inside his chest, his heart was pounding. Perhaps, Veleth continued, clearly enjoying herself, we should remind the human ambassador of his species' place in our grand alliance. You exist because we permit it. Your colonies survive because we allow them to. Your little fleet of 40 ships patrols your borders only because we have not bothered to take them away. More laughter. More clicking. A Kethrani representative made a gesture that Daniel recognized as deeply insulting. Counselor Zyrith rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters of chitin and malice. Let me be clear, Ambassador Carter. Your request is denied. It was denied before you spoke. It will be denied tomorrow and the day after. Earth will receive nothing because Earth deserves nothing. You are the youngest species in this chamber. You are the weakest. You are tolerated only because it amuses us to watch you struggle. He leaned forward, his compound eyes glittering. Go home, little human. Go home and be grateful. We did not decide that your worlds would be better managed by someone else. Daniel Carter said nothing. He did not argue. He did not protest. He simply reached into his jacket and pressed a small button on a device hidden in his pocket. The device was recording everything, transmitting the footage directly to Earth through a quantum-encrypted channel that the Concord did not know existed. He gave a small bow, turned, and walked out of the chamber. The journey back to Earth took 4 days. Daniel spent most of that time alone in his cabin, reviewing the recording and writing his report. He had served his people faithfully for over a decade. He had smiled through 1,000 insults. He had begged for scraps while watching other species feast. But this time was different. This time, the mask had slipped. This time, the Concord had shown its true face to the entire human race. When his ship entered orbit around Earth, Daniel found a message waiting for him. It was from President Lisa Monroe, and it contained only 3 words. "Thank you, Ambassador." 6 hours later, the recording was broadcast on every screen on the planet. Every phone, every tablet, every television, every holographic display showed the same footage. The people of Earth watched as their representative was mocked and humiliated. They watched as alien leaders laughed at their existence. They watched as they were called primitives, primates, creatures that existed only because it amused their betters. For a long moment, the world was silent. Then the silence ended. In cities across the globe, people gathered in the streets. There were no riots, no violence, no chaos. There was only a cold, quiet anger that spread from person to person like a virus. Factory workers stopped their machines and stared at the screens. Soldiers watched the footage and said nothing, their jaws tight. Scientists in laboratories looked at each other and nodded slowly. The message was received. President Monroe addressed the United Nations that evening. She stood behind a simple podium, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes hard as stone. Behind her, the flags of every nation hung motionless. "For 37 years, she said, we have tried to be good neighbors. We have followed their rules. We have accepted their limitations. We have smiled while they took everything we offered and gave us nothing in return. Last night, the galaxy reminded us what they truly think of humanity." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was ice. "They were right about one thing. We are young. We are still learning. But they made a mistake. They showed us exactly who they are. And now we will show them exactly who we are. Somewhere in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that did not exist on any map, Admiral Kevin Shaw received a coded message on a screen that was not supposed to exist. He read it twice, then turned to his crew. "Wake up the fleet," he said quietly. "All of it." In the darkness beneath the waves, lights began to flicker on. The morning after President Monroe's speech, the galaxy woke up to find that Earth had gone quiet. Every communication channel that connected humanity to the Galactic Concord fell silent. The monitoring stations that the Concord had placed in orbit around human worlds stopped transmitting. The diplomatic frequencies went dead. The trade networks showed nothing but static. It was as if an entire species had simply vanished from the cosmic conversation. On Kethris Prime, Counselor Zyrith received the news during his morning meal. His aide, a younger Vethkai named Tarth, stood nervously at the entrance to his private chambers. "The humans have closed all channels," Tarth reported. "Our observers in their system are no longer responding. We have lost contact with every asset we had in their space." Zyrith made a dismissive clicking sound. "Let them sulk. They will come crawling back within a cycle. They have no choice. Without our trade routes, their colonies will starve. Without our fuel shipments, their ships will drift. They need us far more than we need them." But as the hours passed, the silence continued. And then the reports began to arrive. The 3 human colony worlds, Small settlements on the edge of Concord space had activated defensive shields. These were not the simple barrier systems that the Concord had approved for human use. These were military-grade shields, the kind that could withstand orbital bombardment, the kind that humanity had been explicitly forbidden from developing. Impossible, Zyrith muttered as he reviewed the sensor data. They do not have this technology. They cannot have this technology. But the readings did not lie. The shields were real, and they were only the beginning dot deep beneath the surface of Luna, Earth's moon. Admiral Kevin Shaw walked through corridors that officially did not exist. The facility was called Prometheus Base, though that name appeared in no official record. It had been built over 30 years, carved into the lunar rock by workers who had signed lifetime secrecy agreements. Most of the people who knew about it could be counted on two hands. Shaw was a tall man in his early 60s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. He had spent his entire career preparing for a day that he had hoped would never come. Now that it was here, he felt strangely calm. "Status report," he said as he entered the command center. Commander Rachel Dunn looked up from her console. She was younger than Shaw, with dark skin and a focused expression that never seemed to waver. "All ships are reporting in, Admiral. 412 vessels ready for deployment. Crews are at full alert." 412, Shaw repeated. "The Concord thinks we have 40. The Concord thinks a lot of things that aren't true." Shaw allowed himself a small smile. "Show me the fleet." The main display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Scattered across it were hundreds of blue dots, each representing a human warship. They were hidden in asteroid fields, tucked into the shadows of moons, drifting in the darkness between planets. For decades, they had waited in silence. Now, they were waking up. The ships were not like anything the Concord had seen before. Human engineers had studied every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on, then improved upon it in ways that would have terrified their so-called allies. The engines were faster. The weapons were more powerful. The armor was stronger. And the tactics that the crews had trained for were born from 10,000 years of human warfare, refined and perfected for the three-dimensional battlefield of space on Earth. President Monroe signed the formal declaration of withdrawal from the Galactic Concord. It was a simple document, only 2 pages long, but its implications were vast. Every treaty that humanity had signed was now void. Every restriction they had accepted was gone. Every promise they had made was broken. "Some will say we are starting a war," her advisor, a man named Gregory Cole, said quietly. Monroe shook her head. "We are not starting anything. We are finishing what they started when they decided to treat us as less than equals. For 37 years, we have been building in secret. We have been learning. We have been preparing. They thought we were weak because we did not fight back. They were wrong. We were just waiting for the right moment. And this is the right moment? This is the only moment." They showed their hand. They revealed their contempt. If we do not act now, we never will. Across human space, the transformation began. Research facilities that had been hidden for decades came online. Weapons that had been stockpiled in secret were distributed to the fleet. Scientists who had been working on classified projects for their entire careers finally saw their work put into action. Dr. Amanda Price stood in her laboratory on Mars, watching as her team prepared the first batch of zero-point energy cells for deployment. The technology was revolutionary, capable of producing nearly unlimited power from the quantum vacuum itself. The Concord thought that humanity's peak achievement was basic fusion power. They had no idea what Earth had really accomplished. How long until full production? She asked her assistant, a young man named Eric Santos. 6 months for the first run. After that, we can scale up quickly. Within a year, every ship in the fleet will be running on 0 point. Price nodded slowly. Good. Make it 5 months. Meanwhile, the Concord's confusion was turning to concern. Their attempts to contact Earth continued to fail. Spy drones sent into human space disappeared without a trace. Intelligence assets that had been placed on human worlds went silent, either captured or turned. Counselor Zereth called an emergency session of the Council of Voices. The chamber was packed with worried representatives, all of them demanding answers that no one had. "We must send a peacekeeping fleet," Zereth declared. "The humans have clearly lost their minds. They must be reminded of their place in the galactic order. A show of force will bring them back to the negotiating table." High Speaker Veleth of the Marvani agreed eagerly. 60 ships should be more than sufficient. Their entire fleet numbers only 40 vessels. We will surround their homeworld and demand their surrender. The motion passed easily. Within hours, a Concord fleet was assembled and dispatched to the Sol system. 60 warships, led by the massive Vethkai dreadnought Eternal Mandate, jumped to faster-than-light speed and headed for Earth. Commander Zethral, the fleet commander, was confident. He had fought in a dozen campaigns and never lost. The humans were nothing more than primitives who had briefly forgotten their place. He would remind them as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Zethral activated his communication systems and prepared to deliver his ultimatum. But before he could speak, his sensors began to flash with warnings. "Commander," his tactical officer said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "We are detecting. I am not sure what we are detecting." The display filled with contacts. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Ships were emerging from the darkness all around them. Human ships. Ships that should not exist. Ships that were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than anything in the Concord's intelligence files. Admiral Shaw's face appeared on the main screen. "Welcome to our home," he said calmly. "We have been expecting you." Commander Zethral stared at the tactical display, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. The humans were supposed to have 40 ships. 40 small, outdated vessels that could barely defend their own borders. Instead, his sensors showed over 400 contacts surrounding his fleet, and more were appearing by the minute. "This is a trick," he said, though his voice carried no conviction. "They are using decoys. Electronic phantoms. The humans do not have this capability." His tactical officer shook his head slowly. "Commander, these readings are solid. Mass signatures, energy outputs, weapon systems. These ships are real, and they are powering weapons." On the main screen, Admiral Kevin Shaw's face remained calm. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship hummed with quiet efficiency. Human officers moved between stations, preparing for what was about to come. "Commander Zethral," Shaw said, "I know why you are here. You came to remind us of our place. You came to teach us a lesson about respecting our betters." He paused. "Allow me to offer a counter lesson." "You cannot threaten the Concord," Zethral replied, trying to regain his composure. "We represent the combined might of 200 civilizations. Your little display changes nothing. Surrender now, return to compliance, and perhaps we will show mercy." Shaw actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Mercy. For 37 years we watched and learned. We studied your tactics. We analyzed your weapons. We mapped your weaknesses. Every trade mission, every diplomatic visit, every cultural exchange, we were watching. Did you ever once bother to study us?" Zethral did not answer. The truth was no one had. Why would they? Humanity was insignificant. A footnote in galactic history. A minor species barely worth acknowledging. That assumption was about to cost them dearly. "All ships," Shaw said quietly. "Execute Pattern Omega." What happened next would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet did not charge forward in the standard formation that Concord tacticians expected. Instead, the ships scattered in seemingly random directions, breaking into small groups that swept around the flanks of the Concord fleet. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost impossible, each vessel anticipating the movements of its companions without any visible communication. Zethral ordered his ships to hold formation and concentrate fire. It was the standard Concord response to an encircling maneuver. But the humans had anticipated this. They had practiced against this exact tactic thousands of times in simulation. The first volley from the human ships struck 3 Concord cruisers simultaneously. The weapons were not the primitive kinetic cannons that intelligence reports described. They were something else entirely. Energy beams that cut through shields and armor like water through sand. The cruisers broke apart in silence, their crews never knowing what hit them. "Return fire!" Zethral screamed. "All ships, return fire!" The Concord fleet responded with everything they had. Plasma torpedoes streaked toward the human vessels. Mass accelerator rams tore through the void. Beam weapons reached out like fingers of light. Most of them missed completely. The human ships were simply too fast, too agile, dodging and weaving through the barrage with movements that seemed to defy physics. And the shots that did connect splashed harmlessly against shields that were far stronger than anything humanity was supposed to possess. How is this possible? Zethral whispered. Commander Rachel Dunn could have told him if he had asked. She stood beside Admiral Shaw, coordinating the battle with cold precision. The secret was not any single technology. It was everything working together. Engines derived from captured Concord systems, but improved by human engineers. Weapons developed in secret laboratories hidden across the solar system. Shields powered by zero-point energy that the galaxy did not know existed. And crews trained in tactics born from 10,000 years of human conflict. Humanity had never stopped being warriors. They had just learned to hide it. The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of fire and chaos and destruction. When it was over, 43 Concord vessels drifted in ruins, their hulls torn open to the void. The remaining 17 ships fled, their faster-than-light drives screaming as they pushed past safe limits to escape the nightmare they had stumbled into. Zethral was among the survivors. His flagship had taken heavy damage, but it had managed to disengage. As he watched the Sol system shrink behind him, he felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear. The news of the battle reached Kethris Prime within hours. Counselor Zyrith listened to the reports in stunned silence. A Concord fleet had been destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed by the humans. By the species that everyone had laughed at just days ago. "This changes everything," High Speaker Velith said, her voice hollow with shock. For once, Zyrith agreed with her. On Earth, the victory was celebrated with quiet satisfaction rather than wild joy. President Monroe addressed the planet from the steps of the United Nations building, the same place where she had announced their withdrawal from the Concord. "Today, we showed the galaxy that humanity will not be bullied," she said. "We did not seek this fight. We did not want it. But when they came to our home with threats and demands, we answered in the only language they understand. We will defend ourselves. We will protect our people. And we will never again bow to those who see us as inferior." The speech was broadcast across human space and, thanks to carefully placed relay stations, across most of the Concord as well. Billions of beings watched the small human woman speak, and many of them felt a chill run down their spines. In her laboratory on Mars, Dr. Amanda Price watched the broadcast with a tired smile. She had not slept in 3 days, overseeing the deployment of technology that she had spent her entire career developing. It was working. All of it was working. Her assistant, Eric Santos, brought her a cup of coffee. "What happens now?" he asked. Price took a long sip before answering. "Now we show them the rest. The zero-point energy was just the beginning. We have medical technology that can extend human lifespan by centuries. We have material science that makes their best alloys look like wet paper. We have computing systems that can crack their encryption in seconds." She turned to look at him, her eyes bright with exhaustion and triumph. "For 37 years, we gave them our second-best work and let them think it was our best. They called us primitives. They laughed at us. They never once wondered why a species that had gone from horses to spacecraft in 200 years seemed to have stopped advancing. We were sandbagging," Eric said. "We were surviving," Price corrected him. "We knew we could not beat them in open conflict. Not then. So we hid our strength and waited. We learned everything we could about them while showing them only what we wanted them to see. And now that they have forced our hand, we will show them exactly what humanity is capable of." Far away, on the bridge of the damaged Eternal Mandate, Commander Zethral sat alone in the darkness, replaying the battle in his mind. He kept coming back to the same moment, the instant when Admiral Shaw had asked his question. "Did you ever once bother to study us?" No, they never had. And now they were going to pay for that arrogance. 2 months after the Battle of Seoul, human fleets appeared at the borders of 7 Concord species. They did not fire. They did not invade. They simply took position and waited, their weapons powered down but ready, their crews watching in silence. The message was simple: we can reach you whenever we want. Counselor Zyrith demanded an emergency session of the Council of Voices. The great chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity's expense was now filled with fear. Representatives who had mocked Ambassador Carter now spoke in whispers, glancing nervously at the empty seat where Earth's delegation had once sat. "We must respond with overwhelming force," Zyrith declared, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "Assemble the combined fleets. Every species must contribute. We will crush these humans once and for all." But the response was not what he expected. "My people will not commit ships to this war," the Kathrani ambassador announced. "We have seen the recordings from Seoul. We have no desire to share the fate of your fleet." Others agreed. The Solvanus, the Dreeth, the Vorn, all of them refused to join Zyrith's crusade. They had watched the Concord's mighty warships reduced to scrap in 11 minutes. They had seen weapons and tactics that should not have existed. They were not eager to experience those things firsthand. "Cowards," Zyrith hissed. "All of you." "Perhaps," the Kathrani ambassador replied calmly, "but we will be living cowards." While the council argued, humanity was not idle. Captain Marcus Cole led a special operations team through Morvani space, moving in a small, fast ship that was designed to avoid detection. Their mission had been planned for years, waiting for the moment when it could finally be executed. Marcus was a quiet man with steady hands and cold eyes. He had spent 2 decades preparing for operations like this one. He had trained in secret facilities. He had studied Morvani security systems. He had learned their language, their customs, their weaknesses. Now, it was time to put all of that preparation to use. Approaching the facility, his pilot reported. No sign of detection. The Morvani research station hung in orbit around a barren moon, far from any major population center. It was officially listed as an agricultural research post. The truth was far darker. For 30 years, the Morvani had been capturing human colonists from border worlds, isolated settlements, mining outposts, small communities that would not be missed. They had taken these people and brought them here, to this station, to study them, to experiment on them, to learn what made humans different from other species. The Concord had known about this. They had allowed it. They had even shared the research data among member species. After all, the humans were just primitives. Who would miss a few thousand of them? Marcus and his team cut through the station's hull without triggering any alarms. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, neutralizing guards before they could raise an alert. The Marvani security forces were trained for conventional threats. They had no experience with human special operations. It was over in less than an hour. "We found them," Marcus reported through his encrypted communicator. 3,217 survivors. They are alive. Many of them are in bad shape, but they are alive. Admiral Shaw's voice came back immediately. "Bring them home, Captain. All of them." The evacuation took 3 days. Human transport ships arrived and departed in shifts, each one carrying precious cargo back to Earth. The Marvani government, still reeling from the exposure of their secret facility, sent frantic protests through diplomatic channels. "This is a violation of 17 treaties," High Speaker Veleth declared. "This is an act of war." The human response was delivered by Ambassador Daniel Carter, the same man who had stood in the council chamber and endured their mockery. This time, he did not come to beg. "We are not bound by your treaties," he said, his voice hard as steel. "We left your alliance. We owe you nothing. And you owe us an explanation for why our people were being held in your torture facilities." Veleth tried to respond, but Carter was not finished. "We have documentation, records, testimony. We know exactly what you did to those people. We know about the experiments. We know about the deaths. We know everything." He placed a data chip on the table between them. "And now the galaxy will know too." The data was released simultaneously across every communication network in Concord space. Millions of beings watched the footage from the Marvani research station. They saw the cells where humans had been kept. They saw the laboratories where experiments had been conducted. They saw the faces of the survivors, pale and scarred and broken. But that was only the beginning. Human intelligence operatives had been embedded in Concord worlds for years, gathering information, building cases, documenting every crime committed against their species. The Marvani experiments were just one piece of a much larger picture. The Vethkai had been sabotaging human colony ships for decades, making it appear as if human technology was unreliable. The Dreeth had been stealing human patents and claiming the inventions as their own. A dozen species had been working together to keep humanity weak, dependent and ignorant of their true potential. All of this was exposed. All of this was broadcast for the galaxy to see. On Earth, President Monroe watched the reactions flood in from across known space. Some species were horrified by the revelations. Others tried to deny them. A few openly called for reform of the Concord. The alliance that had stood for thousands of years was cracking at the seams. "This is going better than we hoped," Gregory Cole observed. Monroe nodded slowly. The Concord was built on lies. "We are simply showing everyone what was hidden beneath the surface. Let them decide for themselves what kind of alliance they want to belong to." In the medical facilities where the rescued colonists were being treated, doctors and nurses worked around the clock to undo the damage that had been done. Many of the survivors had been captive for over 20 years. Some had been born in captivity, never knowing any life outside the Marvani laboratories. Dr. Amanda Price visited the facility when she could spare the time from her other duties. She sat with patients, listened to their stories, and made notes for the engineers who were developing new medical technologies to help them recover. One evening, she found herself talking to an elderly woman named Margaret, who had been captured from a mining colony when she was just 19 years old. "I never stopped believing," Margaret said, her voice weak but steady. "I knew someone would come for us eventually. I just had to hold on long enough. Price held her hand and tried not to cry. We should have come sooner. We should have known. You came when you could, Margaret replied. That is what matters. You came. Later that night, Price stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Concord was falling apart. Somewhere out there, the species that had laughed at humanity were learning what it meant to face a people who had been pushed too far. The reckoning had begun, and it was far from over.